Good morning, guys, and welcome back to this channel. Today we are going to talk about history. So this is going to be Fun on Two Wheels History Channel section. So we are going to try to answer one of the most asked questions in the web, which is why on earth are British driving on the left side of the road and not on the right side as for the rest of the population in the globe. Well, first of all, just to be clear, it's not just the British driving on the left side of the road. In fact, if you have a look at this map that I'm showing you now, you see the countries in blue are countries driving on the left. So there is, I don't know, Australia, there is South Africa, there is India, and so on, right? But don't be fooled, because all of those countries, the majority, 95% of those countries in blue, are basically English former colonies or British former colonies. So they were basically forced by the British to drive on the left, and they never, chose it. So that leaves us with, the UK, the Great Britain on one side, and the rest of the world on the other side. So the question is even more important. Why this difference? So why did British decided to go left and not right? Well, if you ask them, they will tell you a very simple thing, that they never changed the way to drive. Because since the dawn of time, people used to move, let's say, in this case, not really to drive, to move, to travel, whatever, on the left side of the road. Now, is that true? No, that's not true. That's absolutely incorrect. What's true, though, is that in the medieval age, knights on horses used to, let's say, ride on the left to be ready to fight their opponent coming from the right. And why is that? Because most people are right-handed. So of course, if you have to take, the sword with your right hand to fight your opponent, it's going to be way easier than, again, taking your sword, moving on the left to fight your opponent. So essentially, the way to ride or to travel, to move, was basically dictated by the fact that the majority of people, probably around 90% of people on earth, are right-handed. That's it. So moving on the left was just a consequence of this human physiology, right? And again, it does not apply to every countries. It does apply to very specific ages, like the medieval age. And and again, remember, when we say driving, remember that there were no rules until the 19th century in most of the cases. So essentially people were moving in any place of the road, also because roads were not the way they are now, with lanes, traffic lights, asphalt infrastructure. Roads are basically like country roads, so there were no rules. People would just move everywhere. So that's the reality of the facts. Now, what happened is that another element of truth is that the British blame Napoleon, because Napoleon actually forced all the countries conquered in Europe to, again, travel, to move. We don't use the word, drive, because there were no motors at that age, So Napoleon, that's a fact, he forced, the countries conquered to move, to travel on the right. This was a political and historical reason, because the aristocracy used to drive on the left, and after the French Revolution he said, no, everybody's gonna travel, on the right. So Napoleon effectively changed the way to move in part of Europe. But bear in mind that Napoleon never conquered Russia, Africa, China, US, Canada, and whatever. So when we talk about Napoleon, we are talking about Europe, and not even all Europe, part of Europe. So that again doesn't explain why the majority of countries decided to move to the right. And that's exactly why I will try to explain that to you today. Because of course, when you read that, English documents, they always say the truth. They always tell the truth. But the truth is a bit different. So this was all the summary of historical facts. Now we go to the reason why we are actually driving on the right and not on the left, except for, again, the British. The reason is, again, human physiology. So think about that. When you play tennis, which hand are you going to use? In 90% of the cases, your right hand. When you write, you're going to use your right hand. When you need to use a sword, although you don't need it anymore, you will use your right hand. Now, if you ever look at this other picture, which is one of the first cars ever built, you will see that there was no cabin, so there was just one seat at the front. And look carefully. Look carefully. What do you see? The handbrake and the gearbox or the gear stick are placed on the right side. So your handbrake is like your racket, is like your sword. The same is for the gear stick, especially for the gear stick. So they were placed at the side of the cabin because there was no cabin. But then what happened is that cars were evolving, so more space was made, and you know, they put two seats at the front and then they started to cover them. So as a consequence of this, everything was moved to the left in order to leave, you know, the gear stick and the handbrake to the right side. So at that point, when everything was moved and this, you know, the car was made, everything was totally fine. Driving now on the road, on the right side of the road, was just again the consequence of the decision of where to place, you know, things in a car. Again, the gear stick, the handbrake, the seats, and the steering wheel. So of course, for the incoming traffic, it made sense to travel on the right. So once again, the reason today we drive on the right and on the left is dictated by human physiology. It's again your right hand, like for the sword. It's just serving a different need, but it's again a consequence of the fact that we are 90% right-handed. That's the real reason. All the rest is just, you know, chitty chat conversations, pub conversations, right? This is just the reality. End of the story. So why did the English never changed to the right? Well, first of all, because they are very stubborn. They will never admit that, you know, they did the wrong thing. But to be fair and honest to them, the English, I mean the British, they imposed their rules, at least in Britain and in all the former colonies, way before the advent of modern motors, cars. Imagine that, you know, the first mass-produced car was made by Henry Ford around 1913, and in Europe cars developed around like 1940, 1950, those kind of, you know, times. While, you know, London at that time was already congested around the 18th century, so 18th, like 15, 1820, London was already crazy traffic. So for the former colonies, but especially in London. So what they did in London, I think around 1830, something like that, they made a law saying, hey, whoever has to cross the London Bridge, and in London in general, has to move on the left, because the traffic was so intense. There were already so many accidents, and there were no rules on the way to drive. You see, there were no rules. They had to put a rule. So they said, okay, you know what, medieval ages we used to move on the left, let's just stick with it. So everybody's on the left, everybody moves on the left, and you know, we avoid collisions. And then only a few years later, around 1835, they propagated this law to all the former colonies. That's why in Australia, in India, in South Africa, even in Malta, they drive on the left side, because it was decided by the British. And again, it made sense. It made totally sense. But this was before, well, almost a century before the advent of modern cars, and modern needs, as we said, the gear stick on the right and whatever. So the British did actually consider a few times the fact that they could move, or they should move to the right side and be consistent with the rest of the globe. The problem is, it's a bit too late. So for other countries like Sweden for example, which is a small country, they used to drive on the left, and they changed to the right in around the 1960. At that time, in the 60s, there was not the traffic there is today. As Sweden is a small country, so they were able to do it in the night, of course preparing everything up front. And that's why, you know, it was easy for Sweden, and it's not easy for the UK or for London. So essentially, the cost of changing the way to drive now would be so high that essentially they give up. That's it. That's not the truth. So now again, this is the reality what I'm telling you. It's based on many documents, information, readings and whatever. You have to consult all the sources, not just the English sources, because they will tell you, of course, the truth they want. For example, they will argue with you. Most people in England, they will argue with you. They will actually, argue with you about the gear stick, the fact that the gear stick has to be placed on the right side, because they say no, it has to be placed on the left where it is, because with my right hand I want to, you know, strongly handle my steering wheel. You know, I want to place like my strong hand on the steering wheel while I change with the left hand. Well, that's another big bollocks. You know why? First of all, you don't need any strength for the steering wheel, and second of all, you are not supposed to change gear while you're steering. So the right way to do is you change gear, you know, you downshift, for example, before the bend, and then with both hands on the wheel you do the bend. That's the way you do it. So it doesn't really matter where the gear stick is in the case, right? The importance of having the gear stick on the right is just precision, and also strength back in the day when they had these handbrakes. Now it's all gone. If you think about that, the problem is basically gone, because with the advent of, you know, all these automatic gearboxes and electric cars, the gear stick is basically gone, and so is the handbrake. It's all essentially electric. So it doesn't really matter nowadays if you drive on the right, on the left. Everything is going to be electric and everything is going to be fine. In fact, when you ride a motorbike, you know, anybody from any country can just come to Britain or to whatever, any British country, and just be used the way they drive in literally 10 minutes, because the motorbike, of course, motorbikes are not affected. You know, the gear stick, the brake lever, everything is already there, same way it is. Problem is for cars, because cars you need to get used to, you know, to the. In fact, what is the first thing you do when you go to one of these countries? You try to rent a car with automatic gearbox, of course, right? So that's it, man. That's like concludes this kind of History Channel stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you agree with me, leave a comment below. If you don't, still leave a comment below, and let me know what you think about all this story. Remember to like the video, subscribe if you didn't already. New content is coming, and I'll see you in the next video, I suppose. Stay safe and enjoy riding. Bye bye, guys. Bye.